Are we witnessing the complete implosion of a franchise that was supposed to be championship ready just months ago? The Dallas Mavericks season has gone from promising to catastrophic in record time, and now the entire basketball world is watching as one of the league's most storied franchises appears ready to blow it all up. With a dismal 4-11 record and their front office already in shambles following last season's disastrous Luka Doncic trade, the Mavericks are reportedly preparing to put Anthony Davis and several other key pieces on the trading block before the deadline. This isn't just a minor adjustment, this is a full-scale fire sale, and teams across the NBA are circling like sharks sensing blood in the water. Among those interested observers, the Boston Celtics, who despite their own 8-7 start and the absence of injured superstar Jason Tatum, find themselves in a position to potentially capitalize on Dallas's misery. But here's the million-dollar question. Is there actually anything worth taking from the wreckage of this Maverick season? Let's dive deep into what this potential fire sale means for Boston's championship aspirations and whether Brad Stevens should be picking up the phone to make a deal. Let's set the scene. The Dallas Mavericks entered this season with legitimate playoff aspirations in a brutally competitive Western Conference. They had Anthony Davis anchoring their front court, the promise of Kyrie Irving's eventual return from a torn ACL, and a supporting cast that looked solid on paper. Fast forward to mid-November, and the wheels have completely fallen off. At 4-11, the Mavericks aren't just struggling, they're drowning. Davis remains sidelined with a calf injury, and Irving is still months away from seeing the court. The front office has already been gutted following the Luka Doncic trade debacle that sent shockwaves through the league last season. Now, according to ESPN's Tim McMahon, the organization is ready to admit defeat on this iteration of the roster and start building around their future centerpiece, presumed number 1 pick Cooper Flagg. The logic is sound, even if it's painful for Mavericks fans to swallow. In a Western Conference where even making the playoffs requires excellence, a 4-11 team with its 2 best players unavailable isn't going anywhere. Better to extract value from Davis and other veterans now while the market still exists, rather than watch their trade value evaporate as the losses pile up and the season spirals beyond salvation. This creates a fascinating dynamic across the league. When a team with legitimate talent decides to sell, buyers emerge from everywhere, and the Celtics, despite their own early season challenges, are absolutely in the conversation. The Celtics sit at 8-7, which isn't exactly lighting the world on fire, but context matters. Jason Tatum's injury has forced the team to navigate without their best player, and the offseason saw significant roster turnover that's still being integrated. Yet, Boston remains competitive, showing the kind of resilience that championship-caliber organizations display. Brad Stevens and his front office staff aren't sitting idle. They're constantly scanning the landscape for opportunities to improve the roster, both for the immediate future when Tatum returns and for the long-term vision of sustained championship contention. The Mavericks' fire sale presents exactly the kind of market inefficiency that smart executives look to exploit. Desperate sellers often create bargain opportunities for savvy buyers. But here's where things get complicated. Just because Dallas is selling doesn't mean they're giving away quality assets that actually fit what Boston needs. Let's break down the realistic possibilities. On paper, Anthony Davis represents the kind of transformational talent that could elevate any contender. The 32-year-old superstar has been linked to Boston before. Nearly a decade ago, there was serious discussion about pairing him with Kyrie Irving in what would have been one of the league's most dynamic duos. Obviously, that never materialized, and looking at the current situation, it's clear why a Davis to Boston deal makes zero sense now. First, there's the contract situation. Davis is making massive money, and to make the salaries work in any trade scenario, the Celtics would have to include Jaylen Brown. Let me be crystal clear. That's not happening. Brown is a cornerstone of Boston's present and future, a two-way force who's proven himself in the biggest moments. Trading him for an aging, injury-prone Davis, no matter how talented, would be organizational malpractice. And let's talk about that durability issue. Davis is currently sidelined with a calf injury, which is just the latest in a long line of health concerns that have plagued his career. At 32, he's on the wrong side of the aging curve for a player whose game relies heavily on athleticism. The Celtics need reliability, especially with their championship window wide open. Davis represents too much risk for too high a price. The Celtics could certainly use a big man of Davis's caliber in theory, but the practical realities of making a deal work, both financially and strategically, make this a non-starter. Boston's front office won't even entertain serious conversations about this possibility. The role players, digging through the options if Davis is off the table, what about the supporting cast? This is where things get interesting, even if the ultimate answer might still be disappointing for Celtics fans hoping for a blockbuster move. Daniel Gafford immediately stands out as someone who'll be available. The Mavericks have a logjam at center, and Gafford's $14.4 million salary over the next 3 years represents a reasonable commitment for a quality big man. But here's the problem. His skill set is almost identical to what Boston already has in Neemias Queta. Neither player can stretch the floor with shooting range, which limits their utility in today's NBA. Do the Celtics really want to commit that level of money to a non-shooting big, especially when acquiring Gafford would likely cost them Sam Hauser or Anthony Simons to make the salaries match? That's a tough sell. Najee Marshall presents a more intriguing option. At $9.5 million, he's a useful wing on a reasonable deal who could provide depth and versatility. He's not a game changer, but he's the kind of solid role player who helps winning teams. The question becomes whether Boston values him enough to give up assets to acquire him. Klay Thompson at $16.6 million looks like a classic case of a declining veteran on an inflated contract. While his championship pedigree and shooting ability are undeniable, he's not the player he once was, and that salary is tough to justify for his current production level. Caleb Martin is another name that might come up at $9.5 million, but there's a concerning trend with him. He apparently can only shoot when wearing a Miami Heat uniform. His performance has cratered since leaving South Beach, making him a risky acquisition. PJ Washington would be interesting, but he's ineligible to be traded this year due to league rules, so we can cross him off the list entirely. And then there's Kyrie Irving at $36 million. For obvious reasons, his age, injury history, contract, and the drama that seems to follow him, he's not worth discussing as a realistic option for Boston. The financial puzzle. Why a deal is harder than it looks here's where the rubber meets the road, and why a Celtics-Mavericks trade is more complicated than simply identifying players of interest. Dallas is hard-capped at the second apron, sitting just $1.5 million below that threshold with their current roster commitments. This severely limits their flexibility in any trade scenario. They essentially can't take back more money than they send out. On the flip side, the Celtics are deep in the repeater tax and have zero interest in taking on additional significant salary unless it's for a genuine difference maker. None of the realistic names available from Dallas meet that threshold. Boston might want to roll Anthony Simons' contract into some deals for next season, but unless Dallas simply wants to dump long-term money from their books, which seems unlikely given they can probably do better on the open market for their role players, it's difficult to see Simons being of interest to them. This financial reality creates a fundamental mismatch between what Dallas needs to do, shed salary while getting assets, and what Boston is willing to do, only take on money for impact players. It's the classic trade negotiation stalemate where both sides have logical positions that simply don't align. The bigger picture, should Boston even be shopping? Stepping back from the specific Dallas situation, there's a broader question worth asking. Should the Celtics be looking to make moves at all right now? They're 8-7 despite missing Tatum and integrating new pieces. That's not a disaster. It's actually a sign of organizational depth and coaching excellence. When Tatum returns, this team could quickly climb the standings and reassert itself as a legitimate contender. Sometimes the best trade is the one you don't make, especially when your core is intact and your issues are more about health and chemistry than fundamental roster construction. Brad Stevens has built his reputation on being patient and strategic, not reactive. He's not going to make a move just to make a move, especially not one that mortgages future flexibility for marginal present-day improvement. The Mavericks' fire sale might create opportunities around the league, but that doesn't mean Boston needs to be at the front of the line. The verdict: a long shot for both sides. After examining all the angles, the most likely outcome is that the Celtics and Mavericks don't find common ground for a deal. The financial constraints, roster fit issues, and strategic priorities of both organizations simply don't align well enough to create a mutually beneficial trade. Dallas will find buyers for their assets. There are always teams willing to take a chance on talent, especially in a league where one player can change your trajectory. But Boston probably isn't that buyer, at least not for the pieces Dallas is most likely to move. The Celtics are better served staying patient, letting their roster gel, getting Tatum back healthy, and reassessing their needs closer to the trade deadline when the market is more fully formed. If the right opportunity emerges, whether from Dallas or elsewhere, Stevens will pounce. But forcing a deal just because another team is having a fire sale, that's not how championship organizations operate. So, what do you think? Should the Celtics be more aggressive in pursuing pieces from Dallas? Or is patience the right strategy here? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this analysis valuable, smash that like button to help us keep bringing you the most in-depth coverage of all the NBA's biggest storylines. The trade deadline is still weeks away, and you can bet we'll be here breaking down every rumor, every possibility, and every move as it happens.